And we are live. Yay!
Yay.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. This is week one of a brand new series that I am so excited for, called Empowered Relationships. And if you don't know me, my name is Lori Beth, and I am a relationship and intimacy coach. And I'm also a licensed therapist. And I work with conscious, successful, powerhouse women, helping them to meet the right partner for them without changing who they are. And I will probably say more at the end about the, share a little bit more in depth about the work that I do. Just to give a little bit of background about the show, I used to do an interview series called Exploring Genuine Transformation. And I actually had a lot of relationship experts come on there. And it's one of my very favorite things to do, is to do these live interviews or live conversations. And so as I decided that I wanted to create a new show that was specifically focused on relationships, and specifically on long-term partnership, I would say. Obviously, everything that will be talked about in this show is something that you can take into all of your relationships, because there are so many overlaps. So I am going to be bringing on relationship coaches, intimacy experts in the field of attachment theory, therapists, probably people from the authentic relating world, as well as women and couples who are in long-term relationships of all different sorts, so that we can learn from them, like what makes a solid, lasting relationship. So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm so excited to be here with Marie Thouin. How do you say your last name, actually?
Oh, Thouin. In French,
okay.
I'm not in English. I have no idea.
Great. I'm realizing I've never said your last name before, so I wasn't sure how to say it. So for week one, I'm going to be Marie and I are going to be having this conversation about creating your own dating path. And we'll get into that in a moment. But first, I just want to introduce Marie. Marie is a dating and relationship coach. Her coaching practice is called Love Insight. And one of the things that I love I've been following Marie for a while, and just have really resonated with your work so much. One of the things that I love about it is you are bringing mindfulness and consciousness and awareness into people's dating lives and into their relationships. And specifically, how do you use every moment of the process as a way to learn more about yourself, which we'll get into more when we talk about dating. And I also love your emphasis on really helping people carve the kinds of relationships that they want. So just getting super clear about, like, what kind of partnership do you want? Do you want monogamy? Do you want polyamory? Do you want it this certain way? Do you want it that certain way? And really being able to think outside the box. It's something that I'm such a stand for in my own life and in my own work, around really clearing the conditioning of who we've been taught that we're supposed to be, in order to be loved, in order to have a relationship, really clearing that so that people can be more of who they are and actually create the relationships that they actually want. So I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be the first person to, launch this series with you.
Yay. Yay. Well, so we're going to dive into the topic. I think that this topic was really birthed, I would say, out of a conversation that Marie and I had, where I think we both share this desire, in our work and with our clients to really help clients feel a sense of ownership and empowerment in how they want to date. You know, and we could say that's from the very it's like, do you want to online date? Like, how do you want online dating to go? Like, what's the exact kind of, you know, what feels good for you? Like, how much do you want to be online? How long of a conversation do you want to have with someone when you're going back and, you know, in a back and forth before you meet? All of these things that, you know, I think that if we're not bringing mindfulness and consciousness to them, and those are just a couple of examples, obviously, then if we're not bringing that mindfulness or that consciousness, then dating can feel draining, and it can feel arduous. And we can also be, I would say, almost like out of touch with ourselves. Like I've seen so many of my clients just feel like, well, this is either I have to do online dating, or even like I have to do online dating as a prescription. I'm using this as an example because there's many ways to meet people. But really getting clear of like, oh, wow, this is how it would feel good for me. Okay, now I tried that. And oh, now I'm noticing that it's starting to feel a little bit draining. Okay, what do I want to shift? Or like, do I want to go back? Do I want to take a break? So all of these really, like, they seem kind of minute, but they actually are so important in staying really clear and enlivened in our energy, like as we continue to date. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add something to that particular topic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think that dating is so, such an opportunity to be more intimate with ourselves. Like everything that you just described, you know, it's like, okay, being attuned to how do I want this dating to go? Like, where do I turn? Okay, I'm going to date online or not. And if I do, then what app do I choose? How do I pick the photos I'm putting out there? Just like all of those decisions. How do we just take this whole process as an opportunity to have our own back and develop that sense of intuition and self-trust and self-intimacy, which will reverberate and serve us in all different aspects of our lives. First of all, like it can help us in our work and our friendships, etc., etc. And of course, it's a training also for getting more intimate with somebody else and perhaps getting into a longer term relationship. If that's what we want, then we have that kind of self-intimacy that we need to navigate commitment and deeper intimacy with somebody else. So I think it's so cool to zoom in to that process with that kind of, you know, curiosity and dedication.
Yeah, I love what you're saying right now. I just want to stress like a certain point of what you made. I feel like it took it to a deeper level, which is like kind of like that first, the self-intimacy and the self-knowing, right? Of even like how you're doing dating, how that one contributes to you having your own back, being able to hold yourself, feeling empowered. And then two, it contributes then to you actually like dating in a very authentic way, in a very real way to yourself. And like you said, the more you can be in that self-intimacy and that self-trust and that knowing of what's true for you. And what I would actually add in that I talk a lot about in my work about having like, what are your standards? What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that are most important to you? The more you're connected to that in yourself and you're practicing that in dating, I mean, the more you're connected to yourself, the more you're going to be able to bring that into dating. But then also the more that you're practicing that, the more likely you are to actually meet someone who is a match for you and for that.
Right. That is so true. I like to speak about that as creating a big magnet for our partner, for the people that we want to attract. And that magnet, like, what is that? And I think what it is to kind of have that really strong self-relationship and that clarity and that commitment to like, oh yes, this is actually what I want. And I'm not gonna, you know, go for the things that I know I don't want just because they're easy to get or because certain parts of my personality is attached to them, or there's an addictive behavior over here, and kind of being able to see through that kind of those muddy waters, because of course dating will kick up all of this mud. It's like so powerful in that way. It will show us so much about who we are and different aspects of our personality and our trauma and our conditioning. Like it shows us everything. And then to be able to have more clarity and just really focus on what is it that our heart really wants for our evolution, it does create this big magnet. And I think it does reflect in who we attract.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said so many things in there. I'm just digesting all of that. And I mean, the thing that's coming up for me as I listen to that is that there's a like, you know, often people are like, oh, I just want to meet the person. I want to meet the person. And what I think you're really paving like a path for is actually like every step of the way is an opportunity to grow and an opportunity to learn about yourself. And it's all preparing you to be able to be in partnership, be in relationship in a way that is authentic, connected. You're holding yourself. I mean, I think we share these values of, you know, supporting people to be in what I would call like what I consider to be like more sovereign, you know, like differentiated, like I've got me, you've got you, but we can come together and work with ourselves. And then I actually don't know this about your work, but I'm guessing from what you said, like I know a big part of my work is helping people to work with their bodies and their nervous systems and their attachment systems so they're not being ruled by them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the dating process itself is such a like potent place to be able to work with that, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, wow, I'm so drawn to this man, let's say. I have so much chemistry. Let's say for someone who might be, you know, more anxiously attached, that tendency to be like, he's the one without actually slowing down. And this is what I love about your emphasis on mindfulness and like, you know, just, I keep like, even as I say it, I'm like, take a deeper breath, come into my body. It's like, okay. You know, like having that, like developing clarity in your own being and developing that ability to slow down and really feel what's happening for me. And, you know, to be able to work through some of the traumas that come up and also to not make decisions from those traumas or from your attachment system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, mindfulness and dating just really, it's kind of like holding a mirror, like a gentle mirror to ourselves as we are going through the motions and we're observing ourselves like, okay, like that desire and that longing for partnership and the actions that we take towards that. And then the reactions we have to different, you know, stimuli that happen along the way, different people. Like it is such a brilliant tool for self-understanding and healing. Because at those decision points, when we observe ourselves, we witness ourselves with love and compassion and gentleness, then we can decide to take a different route, or we might even have a lot of insights that just kind of naturally stir us in a different direction.
I'm so enjoying how you're talking about this, because I think that is a big component of my work. And I often talk about it. I often am on the side of, I'm often on the side of looking at discernment and boundaries. Like, how do you, you know, which can take a kind of, we could call it an inner masculine, but also I would say can take sometimes a kind of like fortitude, right? Like, okay, I'm not going to go down this path. And the way that you're speaking about it, which I love so much, is like the importance too, which I also work with and talk about, but of bringing in more of the compassion, the softness, like if we can move really, really slow, let's say, then we can see the pattern more clearly. And that's part of also, right, like trauma work is that way too. It's like trauma or our attachment systems kind of going haywire, right? can lead us to move really fast, both in like getting to know people, but also just in like, not when we're moving that fast or when we're activated, we can't actually feel like what is really going on. What am I feeling? So I love this emphasis. And I think that they also work well together. It's like, you want to support somebody in making a powerful decision, like the decision of, okay, I actually really don't want to be ruled by my anxious attachment because it hasn't gotten me the kind of love that I truly want. Right. Or I don't want to be ruled by, I talk to women, you could probably give me examples too, who like, maybe they have a woman that they have what they would call maybe like a little bit of a seductive pattern. Wow, I can go out with anyone and just, the men think that I'm so into them, but I'm actually not. Right. And then like, they maybe then feel pulled in when they're actually not available. Right. And so, we don't want to be ruled by those things. I mean, that's my view is like, and I think it's yours, but you can say more, that we want to be in reality-based dating, not fantasy-based dating, to have what we really want. Right.
Right. I mean, and like those fantasies, they're interesting because they do change depending on who people are. Like there's people who, like, what is those fantasies? I think they're related to our defense mechanisms that we've developed, as children, as teenagers, as adults, to keep us safe. And for some people, it might be being really flirty and being really seductive with everyone. Maybe that's what they've learned that keeps them safe or comfortable. For some people, it's the other way around. Like, I think I've always had more of a struggle with being kind of really, really boundaried and really numb in a way and shut down and not opening my heart. So my path has been more about, like, in a way, pushing myself to go towards more intimacy and open my heart and take emotional risks. So when I work with clients, it's kind of interesting because we first look at what is your main defense mechanism or mechanisms. You can have more than one. And then how do you gently go a little bit more the other way? Whether you're more avoidant or more anxious. Maybe you have too many boundaries, or maybe you don't have enough boundaries. So it's such an individualized work. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I love hearing about that. It feels I love the phrasing of the defense mechanism, like, and just that I think that that's also feels like sounds like you do that at the beginning of your work to really start to identify with people, like, oh, this is the mechanism, this is the coping strategy, right? This is the protection strategy. And really what and this so goes in alignment with, the whole path, like dating as a path to self-discovery, and to learning more about yourself. It's like bringing mindfulness to that pattern so that you can shift it, because usually, right, that defense mechanism or that protection hasn't been leading the person to actually having what they want. And then, like, even deeper than that, right, like I think what we all, beyond even partnership, right, I think we would say, like, we all want that deep connection to self, first and foremost. I mean, and then I think we all want that so that self-intimacy, but also that intimacy with other. So it feels like, that approach, I can feel, really allows people to begin on that path of, and it sounds like it's like really working with, okay, you have this pattern, how do you try this new thing, and like inching towards that. It's like not like go, just fully open yourself, because I would also say that there's wisdom in the protection, right? So like if you are describing yourself as more boundaried, let's say, there's a wisdom, and I tend to be a little bit more boundaried or discerning as well. I think that there's a wisdom in that, right, like you then are actually potentially going to move a little bit slower, right, with someone. And so it's like, I would also say it's like, how do you hold the wisdom in that point, in that protection, and also lean in a little bit to the new thing, right? Which in that case might include like, I mean, I don't know, you can say what it would include for you, but I imagine, maybe being a little bit like giving the person the benefit of the doubt, or, leaning into a moment of like revealing something that might feel a little bit, vulnerable, and taking the risk to see how that person responds.
Right. Kind of gauging how much does this defense mechanism serve me, and, keeping the part that serves you, and the part that doesn't serve me. Well, can I let some of this go? Both like in my mind and my thoughts and behaviorally. It's kind of this, both, and like internal and external work to, get freer, because it's not about, like doing violence to ourselves and saying like, oh, my defense mechanisms are bad and I must get rid of them. It's really about being free and being able to act from a heart-centered place rather than a reactive and conditioned space.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, because I hear you talking a lot, I think, in your work and even in this conversation of, it sounds like you have a very strong desire with your clients, or you could say like your mission statement is almost like to help people to use their entire dating and relationship experience as a path to self-discovery. We could say as a path to like awakening, but also to have more freedom and more choice. And so would you be willing to kind of share a little bit more about kind of the importance of that, and how you, and why, the importance of that in the importance that you see in that, in doing dating and relationship work with people, and also how you've seen it like really transform your clients.
Yeah. It is a really good way to describe my mission statement. I actually haven't really written a mission statement, but I think I should.
Another great thing about these conversations, right, is that this is, I just want to make a point before you answer, like, this is this is like the heart of our work in action, right? Like when two people get together and they can connect, there's so much more that gets to come out, and we hear and we reflect each other in different ways. And so I love that you're like, oh, a mission statement. Like,
yeah. I'm gonna be going, and writing my mission statement next after this conversation.
Wonderful.
This is great. I know relationships of all kinds can be so generative. That's the beauty of relating, really. It's not to, just like put someone or put a relationship in a box and say like, okay, I feel better about myself because I'm in this relationship. Like, it's really about like, wow, what is going to be created from this very unique moment to moment connection? Like, what's this third thing?
This is what I live for in all my relationships. So I'm right there with you. And I think it's an important point. We'll get back to the answer, but to the question, but I think it's also a really important point that, often people will come to us. I think this is probably true for you as well, where it's like, it's not working for them. They want to have better relationships, or they're wanting to have a partnership. And sometimes there can be a fantasy of like, when I have this partnership, I'll feel this way. Right. Or, when I'm finally with this long-term person and married and whatever, then I'll feel settled, or then I'll feel happy, or then I'll feel free. So obviously we're talking about the pathway to get there. But I think what you just said about relationship, like what happens when two unique people come together. And this is something that I kind of labeled it for myself as co-creative intimacy. Like, what is the moreness that's created out of the relationship? And it's a very moment to moment practice. So of course, especially in friendship and in love, right? You want to like move towards relationships from a place of knowing what your standards are, what's important to you. And I can't stress that enough, because I think that, that's an important way that we feel good, is that we're creating the kinds of relationships that are based on feeling more free and at choice rather than on trauma and the nervous system and our past experiences. So that's important as a frame, but then there's also just the moment to moment of like, you know, and this relates to the dating, like, how am I in presence with this? How do I allow this specific relationship to be exactly what it wants to be? You know, like that balance between the creation and the, like, I have this intention and the, you know, and here we are, what gets to be like, there's magic between us because, right, we have both of those. It's like, we can just be here and see what wants to emerge. So I don't know, that feels connected to dating somehow.
Yeah, I love that conversation, because it also speaks to a bit of a paradox of, like, you know, we as dating coaches and relationship coaches, we want to help people establish a certain structure about what they want, who they are, their relationship with themselves. But really the goal of that structure is to help them get to a place of co-creation, which is a place where you have to let go of control. For that generativity to happen with another human being, you have to be really willing to take an emotional risk of not just being in your little corner in control of what's happening. I mean, it's different than saying that you don't want to have boundaries. It's good to have boundaries and standards on how you want to be treated. But ultimately, the magic is when you let go or soften your self-concept and you're able to actually, like, create a third being energetically. I'm not talking about necessarily like having children. That can be a generative endeavor, but to be in a space with someone and say, like, okay, we're creating something that's different from just me and you as separate beings. It's something that is only happening as a result of our alchemy.
I love that. That was beautifully said. Yeah.
So
yeah, this is such a like delicate dance depending on the person as well, right? Like I think it really depends on your attachment system, and of course everyone's, you know, working towards loosening that self-concept. And yet it seems like, you know, like, again, when there might be more of a boundariedness, right, or someone has that in spades, it's like, how do I open more and allow this? I mean, in both cases, there's a sort of like softening of self-concept and allowing of co-creation. But I think you said it so well that it's like, it really depends. It's like some people really need so much emphasis on that boundary or on that, like, okay, this is me and I'm, you know, and like dance of that, I think, is so unique for each person.
So to come back to your question, we went on a beautiful tangent here. But my, you know, mission statement really about dating as a path of self-discovery and how important I think that is. I mean, part of it is because our intimate relationships are really front and center in the way that we approach life. You know, if we see ourselves as someone who's, you know, chronically single or single by choice or partnered or married or dating or polyamorous, like we really relate to ourselves a lot through the eyes of how we deal with intimacy in our love life. So that concept that you don't have to just be disempowered and taking what life gives you and perhaps being really bitter about it and creating negative narratives about what that relationship to your love life is. Because that's oftentimes how people come to us as coaches. Like, they come with a negative narrative, like, hey, here's all the evidence of why I'm unlucky in love or not desirable, or there's something wrong with me. Everyone else is doing it and I can't, and I just don't know how, or I don't know why it's not happening. And, you know, it can feel like you just don't have any agency over this process. And in that process, you also kind of are tempted to lose yourself, because you're like, well, I better try to do it how other people are doing it. Like, teach me what is the path. And really, I don't think that's a good idea. I think coming back to ourselves in a more authentic way is the way to, first of all, like, heal our relationship with our love life and our own narrative around that and our self-concept. And then to actually attract the people that will fulfill our deepest desires. So it is a process of kind of shifting from a sense of external authority and external voices as kind of the captains of how we should feel about ourselves, and shifting that to a sovereign internal source of authority and self-knowledge and self-trust.
That was so beautifully said. just like, letting that all in. And I love, I love how you're like the dating or relationship is a path to self-discovery, but especially the dating process, right? Like just that, I mean, you said it so well. It's like that, it's like, it's the path to letting go of all those narratives and all those belief systems and all those things that we've really, all the conditioning that we've internalized, you know, over and over again. And then especially, I think, like you said, if you have struggled in love or you've been single for a long time and you didn't want that, right? There can be a sense of victimhood or a sense of like, this is happening to me. And then we can, like, people can mirror that in the process of dating and getting into relationship, right? It's like, well, I have to settle for this because this is all, like, I've been alone for so long and I guess this is all I can have, or right. Or, I mean, there's so many examples, right, of like the places where that, like, yes, we can, there's a lot of compassion for if you want something for a long time, let's say partnership, and then you don't have it, that is a very demoralizing and challenging experience. And I was in that experience for many, many years. So I know it firsthand. But then unfortunately, right, if it's like that then can get, it gets translated into like, it's sort of the, we're wearing like gray colored glasses. It's like everything that we see and the evidence that we're looking for all around us, right, is like, oh, this is hard. I'm powerless to this. And so I love the emphasis too on like, it actually, everything you were talking about made me think of business, because I think of the same thing in business actually, but it's like staying in your own lane, you know, like that's how I think about it. It's like, what is true for me? And what if I'm just going to be so radical and be like, I want to come up with that like exact way I want to date, exact way I want to meet men, like what I'm actually just not a yes to. And like, even if like the whole world, right, like even if everyone else is doing this, it's like, oh, that's not really what's true for me. It's like, even as I say that, I notice that in my system, just even claiming that, I'm like, oh, I feel better, you know? And so I think that that's the experience, right, that people can have when they, I mean, I love, it's your mission statement, but I'm obviously in favor of it.
We can share.
We can share. Yeah, we have a pretty similar vision in terms of like really supporting people to come back into like, to be authentically true to who they are, and to find that place of power and sovereignty and truth that's within them. And what I always find so funny is like, it made me think of a client that I have where our conditioning is really based, like you can see the conditioning when you look at like different people. So like I have a client who I did help with this process of, she was like, oh, dating's not feeling good. I don't like it online. And like, then we went through and literally like piece by piece, we're like, well, how would it feel good? You know, and really kind of crafted it. And, you know, down to like, yeah, I think I said this at the beginning, but little things like, okay, I only want to go online for like 10 minutes a day, you know, like literally it's not enjoyable. But I love her as an example because she is not really in the like spiritual personal development world, and she's super independent, and she really wants to, she really wants to be with actually a man or a woman, that she like is really independent and is not going to like, she's going to feel like she has a lot of space. And she's highly relational, highly emotionally intelligent, especially as we've worked together more and more. She just had it in her, but like hadn't been taught some of this stuff. But like, she really just she loves like her own time and her own sovereignty, I would say. So she's one of these people, like she has a pretty secure attachment in that regard. But what I love is she's like, I don't know if that exists. And like, I just find that it's such a good example, because in a lot of our worlds, like that's what people are like. There's so many, right? Like in the sort of spiritual self-development world, there's so many people who are wanting that level of sovereignty and differentiation, but she doesn't have any models of it, right? And so it's just a good example of also how our conditioning, really, I think I'm not saying this well, but I think it sort of shows the power of our conditioning, right?
Absolutely.
And what we're taught, and how we think like, oh, this is the only thing that's out there. And how that shifts depending on like the culture or the, environment that you're in. And the importance of just being clear with yourself, and then getting into like for her, she wants to see more models of that in the world. Like that's helpful. But also we've just done the work to also get into the belief, that is possible, that because it's something that is true to her, that it exists. Right.
Right. Kind of like both the internal belief and the external role models can both have a big influence. Yeah. It's so interesting. Like, the conditioning piece is so powerful, and it's so hard to disentangle from, what it is that we actually want to feel in our love life. I had a couple of thoughts as you were speaking. One is just like the media. Like I've been really interested in watching some of the trashy dating shows on Netflix that are popping up, like I'm not a fan of The Bachelors, but that's a good example. But yesterday I fell upon a show called Ultimatum, Marry or Get Out, or something like that. And it was like those couples, who had given, one person had given the other person ultimatum, like, hey, you got to put a ring on it or I'm out. And, it's the kind of spirit that is just really glamorized in our culture. It's just that kind of all or nothing. This is all that's out there, as a relationship model. And it does really influence us, because we do internalize what we see, even in songs, even in popular music, like the kind of narratives we hear about love and how love exists and manifests. It's very powerful, and it trains our subconscious to think that there is only one path.
Yeah.
And that we're not allowed to even want something else. Yeah. I wanted to give you also an example of a client who I was working with a little while ago. She was actually in India, and she was 30 and she was not married. And for her, to not be married at 30, she was under such extreme pressure from her family to get married, and it was so intense. And she was like, oh, I don't know why I can't, find the right guy, and I want to be myself, but I really, really need to get married like yesterday. And the process of really uncovering who she really was, kind of revealed the part of her that does not want to be in a relationship at all. Like she wants to focus on her career, and she wants to focus on herself. And she's really struggling with, those external voices versus the part of her that does not want to be in a traditional relationship, at least. And, it's quite painful to try to live in alignment to your truth when you have such sometimes like pressure under your own roof. And it's not just like the media, it's not just like songs, it's not just out there, it's actually people who you care about pressuring you to do a certain thing or to want a certain thing. So it can be a really tenuous path.
Yeah, that's such a great example of also like a clear, like a very strong conditioning for an Indian woman at that age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what it also means, and I don't know what it meant for her, but like out to do the work. I mean, how courageous is what I want to say, that she, did that work with you to uncover her true self and like what was actually there for her, knowing that it actually might cause like a huge rift in her family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or cause some kind of challenge for her. I don't know how it actually panned out. I'm kind of curious, but
yeah. I mean, it's she hasn't given up on wanting a relationship, but she's kind of I think accepted that she might have to wait longer to find the kind of relationship that's really going to work for her, rather than just jumping into a relationship just to get that kind of pressure behind her.
And do you like, did she discover that she didn't actually like, is part of it that I'm curious if she discovered that she still really wants a relationship, but there's a lot, does she actually want to have the relationship now? Like, what did she discover is what I'm curious in that process.
Well, she discovered the really opposing voices in herself. So it was a lot about just kind of seeing the paradox of that and not necessarily like picking one route, and wanting love and wanting intimacy, but without being possessed and without being controlled within the more traditional bounds of arranged marriage, or even, like a quick kind of marriage, like, hey, based on family and based on transaction. Because a lot of what we see in traditional cultures and, and even here in America, like, a lot of relationships are very transactional. And I think more and more people these days are rejecting that. They're saying, no, I mean, I can make my own money. I don't need to have a relationship based on financial security. So I'm going to wait it out until I can have a relationship that's more really heart-based.
Yeah. And I asked that, and I was thinking that it actually, I love that you talked about the conflict, because my sense is that like hers was maybe more outward, right? But then she got to see how it was playing out internally. But I think that so much of when we're wanting love and we don't have it, there's usually some kind of core conflict going on. And right, like I think the example that you just gave can be one of them. Like even unconsciously, even for like, let's say someone who's from the US who's been raised in a more maybe liberal kind of family or system, right? But there can be I'm thinking of a client as well, actually, where there was like like she's really free in her life. She knows she wants partnership. She wants to have a child. And yet there's still, she was able to identify that there was this, there's something that's like, oh, I still feel like I need to please my parents. Like I need to meet this person and have this in order to please my parents. And so similar to your example, right? Even though she really does want the relationship, to me, like those two things are kind of at odds, right? And so it's like having to, and it sounds like your client's been doing this, it's like holding the polarity and then, but learning more about it, becoming more mindful, if we go back to that language, right? And then being able to, in some way, kind of heal both sides of the polarity, like being able to be like, okay, wow, I'm still really holding on to this, idea that I'm somehow failing my parents, right? And I also have this part of me that wants to be really free, and I want to choose based on what feels good for me, right? Like the process of continually bringing awareness to that, and this to me is like the deeper work, and we both do this work in our work with clients, actually allows for there to be the freedom to actually choose and be clear, right? Like I often talk about this as like your core wound, or your kind of one main core belief, right? It's a similar kind of experience of I have some kind of conflict inside that I think I want this, but some other part of me is like not allowing me to have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so interesting. And yeah, it's kind of like parts work. And there's a part of me that wants a relationship. There's a part of me that doesn't. Let's have them be in conversation. Let's, you know,
or in these cases, there's a part of me that really wants this particular kind of relationship that's based on who I am and what would truly light me up. And there's a part of me that feels like I need to just have a relationship, right? And it has to be this person who kind of fits this certain thing so that my parents feel happy, you know? And, you know, in my case, it may not, in the client I was bringing up, like, and I think this is true a lot in this country, is that it can be more of an internalized idea that's not even actually true in the person's family. Like parents are like, great, I would love for you to be in a relationship that feels like generative and supportive and nourishing for you. But again, we're holding on to some of these, you know, these beliefs that we developed in childhood.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They're super powerful. I mean, I think it can go the other way around too. Like some people, okay, like the more typical example is parents who want their kids to get married and have a traditional relationship. But then there's also parents who grow up maybe in divorce or just never really believed in marriage, and then have that expectation that, I mean, or maybe the kid has internalized the expectation that marriage does not work and is not a good thing. And then they have to transcend that. Maybe if at some point their heart actually does want them to be married and have a more traditional relationship. So it can go both ways.
I love the depth at which we went to in this conversation, because I know we, you know, it's funny, like when I think of dating, it's like, it's not, I love how you hold dating, because I think historically, when I think of dating, I kind of think of like, and I think a lot of people probably have this kind of connotation where it's like, I'm like, no, I just want the partner, like the dating process, you know? And over the years, I've enjoyed, like, I've learned to enjoy it more. And obviously it's something that I'm always supporting my clients with, because I also really think that there's I talked about this in a video recently, like it's important to actually take the dating process slow if you're really wanting to see, am I and this person a good match? Right? Like, how do we actually move together? How do we deal with disagreement? How do we deal with conflict? And we have just been fed way too many messages, you know, you name some of them, but also I think of like the romantic fantasy kind of, you know, in all the movies, and like the message of like, you meet the person and it's just instant. And obviously that like ties into all like insecure attachment patterns and just, right. I don't really believe that if we don't take the dating process slow, or the process of getting to know someone, whether you call it dating or not, you know, that you really, like in any friendship, you take time, you know, you see, how do I flow and move with this person? Are we in alignment? Do we have the same values, right? You could have the same values. You could talk at the beginning and you could feel really clear, but you don't know until you actually go through the process. And so I just love that, you know, you have so much emphasis on the dating process, it seems like, in your work, and also on this, that like the whole process of itself is that self-discovery, is that self-intimacy, is that, you know, ability to learn more about yourself and grow, and also learn about the other person and grow. So,
yeah, my gosh, I think dating is so rich. Like if we do frame it as an education rather than a chore, we can learn so much. And I know there's people who are listening now and probably will be like, it's enough, education. I'm tired of this lesson.
Yeah. Well, and so to me,
the education too.
Exactly. Well, and what I was going to say is that to me, that's part of the dating process, is like, it's actually like true with almost anything in our lives, right? Like let's say someone, it's like, if you feel a lot of ownership over your own, I mean, first of all, you can learn about yourself at any stage of the process. That's the point. But if you feel ownership and empowerment around how you're doing the dating process, then, and I've had clients like this, it's like they do online dating for a period, they meet some people, they learn some things, and then they're like, you know what, I'm tired and I actually have all this juju for these other things in my life and I want to take a break. Or I want to see if I go to some classes now that, like, you know, most, at least where I'm living, people are out and about, you know, and okay, I'm going to try that approach. Or even like, I think there's value in coming back to really being in your vision and getting clear. And like, you know, there's different practices, obviously, of like, you know, setting up a love altar and like kind of getting into your own energy, not because, I just want to make a point, not like none of that because you have to get there, but more about like, how do we create the dating path and the path to getting there in a way that feels like it's coming from our own desire and our own enjoyment. So, I mean, I think those, like, to me, I just want to, I think we're nearing the end, but I just want to stress that in the sense that like creating your own dating path is actually, you wanted to maybe title this creativity in dating. And I really love that. Like, how do we be creative? How do we enjoy this? And then what I would say is that I think for some people, and I definitely was in this boat for many years, I had to clear a lot in order to get there. Right. And so that's the work that we've been talking about. I think when we got into some of the deeper work in this conversation around, you know, the like working with conflict, working with polarity, working with the deeper parts so that we can get ourselves back into that energy. And I would say that we're more likely, I mean, yes, I think we can always just be exactly as we are, but I think that when we are feeling good about dating, we're more likely to have a more positive experience. And so again, it's not like you need to try something on or be something. It's more like, how do I do this in the most enjoyable way for me and feel a sense of empowerment around it?
Right. And I think to that note, just creating a lot of love in our lives, you know, like while we're dating, to really cultivate our friendships and cultivate great relationships at work or in our family, etc., as much as we can, and to be generous, to, you know, to practice giving and giving kindness and giving the kind of things that you might want to give to a partner, and you're like almost like holding off and saying like, I have all of this goodness to give and I can't do it until I find this partner. Well, a lot of it is not true. You can do it before you find a partner. You can give a lot of your love, and that also contributes to creating that big magnet and to making the dating so much more fun, because you're in a state of more flow as you're walking that path, and that just makes you more attractive, and it creates this magnetism around you that attracts people who want that kind of love and vibrancy that you have.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great place to end. We could probably riff on this all day, and I
totally
love like how deep we went into it. And I mean, yeah, like just because I think that you said it at one point and it clicked. It's something I was thinking at some point when you were naming, like, it's like you made some comment about like, I don't think you said it this way, but like doing the deeper work, but then also making the behavioral change. And this is like one of the reasons that I love coaching, you know, coming from a therapy background, and I kind of do that in therapy now as well. But I think that this is what's so potent about the coaching world, is that, and the coaching space, especially with dating and love, is that it's like it's like, okay, let's do this deeper work and understand our patterns. And then let's actually like be out there and really work with it when the rubber meets the road, you know?
Yes.
And be able to shift that in real time, which is so empowering. You know, it's like, oh, I'm trying this. How did it go? You know, how do I feel? And it's like, there's so much more movement that can happen in that space, of really taking the actions, like doing things in a different way. So
totally.
Well, I would love for people who on my page who are tuning into this, or this, I'm sure that this interview will then go up on my website at some point, to know more about your work. So if you could share like how people can, like what are the social media channels that you're, most active on, and also any programs that you have going on that the ways that people could work with you.
Yeah,
and also saying a little bit more about who you work with, maybe. Yeah, because I know you don't. I know you work with a wide range of people. So yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I do work with the whole gamut of ages, genders, sexual orientations, relationship orientations. Some people are really monogamous, some people are not. It's all great. Really, I work with people who want to grow through this dating process and who want to go deeper into themselves as they're doing it and learn to love themselves more, etc., etc. So my focus right now is really the one-on-one coaching. I might do more group or workshops in the future, but if anyone is feeling called to have a conversation with me and see if it's a good fit, I do 30 minutes free introductory sessions, and that can be scheduled on my website. It's loveinsight-dating.com. And I'm also on Instagram at love_insight_dating, and on Facebook. People will, who are watching this probably will see my name, but you can just Google my name, Marie Thouin. And yeah, I think that's about it. I look forward to talking to people.
Yeah. And I just want to highly recommend Marie's work. You can probably tell from this conversation, just like the level of insight and knowledge, and also just, like the sort of, minute dated, like moment to moment things that you do with your clients. I just know that there's such, powerful transformations that happen. And also to just, recommend also, I mean, I love just following you. Like I love, some of the little, even like the little memes that you post. I just think like just even following you, I think you provide such powerful content that I think will be so supportive to people.
Oh, that means so much to me. Thank you. I've been also following you on social media for a while now, and your stuff is so inspiring. So it means a lot coming from you.
Yay. Well, again, my name is Lori Beth, and I work with, I said this at the beginning, but I work with conscious, powerhouse, successful women who are ready to clear everything that's in the way of them meeting their soul aligned next level partner. So I have a 6-month one-to-one program called Liberated Relationship Mentorship. And it's a very high touch program. We work with identifying and clearing your one main core belief, which usually comes from your core wound. We talked a little bit about this in our conversation today. And that tends to free you up to feel 100% yourself, free in your own being, and way more positive, and just being able to come from a desire-based, enjoyable way on your journey to meeting your man. And we do a lot of work in this program around getting clear on your standards, your non-negotiables, and making the powerful decision to stick with what it is that you truly want and not let your nervous system and your attachment system rule. So a lot of work around really staying in your adult woman as you go out and you date. And then there's a lot of emphasis too on being the co-creator of intimacy, leaning into transparency, communicating, like if you're into somebody, communicating what's true for you, communicating places that might be more challenging, and then seeing how the man responds. So I am actually just I work with women who are looking for, obviously this is obvious, but a man, it's very specific. And then basically I am like with you, by your side. You have a lot of access to me, and a lot of the magic happens in, a lot of the work happens in, that happens in between sessions. that's where there's a lot of nervous system rewiring that we do, and just like really strong support in you staying in your adult woman and sticking with what is true for you. Because in doing that, you're clearing the space for what it is that you truly want in love. So if you are interested in working with me, please reach out to me, and we will go from there. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you so much, Marie. It's just so fun and enjoyable. And
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.